It is 9:01 on October 16th, 2020, and I am calling to order the special meeting of the board. The process we are using today for today's meeting is authorized by Governor Gavin Newsom's Executive Order N-2920, which he issued on March 17th, which feels like years ago, to address the COVID-19 public health emergency. The meeting is occurring by video conference with all board commissioners, our president, CEO, housing commission staff, and general counsel participating by video. For the record, I will ask each board member to indicate your presence as I say your name. Vice Chair Ryan Klempner.
Here.
Commissioner Dion Akers.
Present.
Commissioner Maggie Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Johanna Hester.
Here.
Commissioner Mitch Mitchell. I saw. Commissioner Mitchell. We'll know he's here once he's talking shortly. No members. Oh, there we go. No members of the public are in attendance. However, members of the public may watch the video conference and hear the audio of today's meeting, which is being streamed live online.
I'm here as well, Commissioner Hubbard.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Hubbard. I was thinking this was going way too easily. Okay. Way too short. So the agenda for today's meeting included a link to the website for the San Diego Housing Commission Board of Commissioners, where the public can access the live streaming for today's meeting. The public has been provided with an alternative opportunity to provide comments to the board through an online comment form. A link to this form was also included in the agenda for today's meeting, which is posted on the San Diego Housing Commission's website, www.sdhc.org, on Thursday, October 8th, 2020. The agenda and the public comment form explain that comments about items on the agenda will be read into the record if they're submitted by 4 p.m. yesterday, Thursday, October 15th. In addition, non-agenda public comments submitted by 8 o'clock this morning will be read into the record. Sorry, I'm going to toggle back over to our agenda. Sorry, everybody. A little bit of patience living that Zoom life. Cannot wait to see you all back in the commission offices. OMG. Sorry. Okay. Non-agenda public comment. We did not receive any non-agenda public comment before 8 a.m. unless I am wrong, in which case we can jump in. So we'll move on to commissioner comments. Do we have any commissioner comments? Okay, we're cooking already. Look at us moving through this. And moving on to the report by the President and Chief Executive Officer. Mr. Gentry?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a brief report, 3 items, all positive occurrences that have happened since the last Housing Commission Board meeting I would just like to share with you all. The first is on Tuesday of this week, October 13th, the City Council, acting in its role as the housing authority, unanimously approved this board's recommendation for the Housing Commission to acquire 2 hotels under the state's Project Home Key program. And I'll point out that the Housing Authority, the City Council's vote was unanimous. You will recall that the Residence Inns located on South Hotel Circle and in Kearny Mesa will create some 332 permanent housing units with supportive services for San Diegans experiencing homelessness. These units will be able to accommodate as many as 400 individuals who are currently at the temporary shelter at the San Diego Convention Center. I'll point out during the council meeting on Tuesday, Chair Benvenuto called in and shared this board's strong support for these hotel purchases. And I'd like to thank each member of the board, all of you, for your support and for your comments at the board meeting on this item last month. I would also like to take just a moment to acknowledge the wonderful work of some folks at the Housing Commission. The first is a general counsel, Chuck Christensen, who took the lead on this project. Chuck did a wonderful job shepherding it through, missing some landmines and getting some good stuff done. I also want to recognize the outstanding work of our staff in this important accomplishment. 3 people in particular, especially our real estate department, led by Mike Pavko, our Homelessness Housing Innovations Division, headed by Lisa Jones, and of course, our Chief of Staff, Jeff Davis. And these three people, along with Chuck, were the principals in getting this across the finish line. And we're looking toward probable closing. Earliest will be about November the 11th, perhaps a little later, with occupancy in these hotels in December of this year. You can expect a celebratory event then, whether in person or virtual. The second significant item that occurred since the last board meeting also happened on Tuesday, October 13th, this week as well. And this was a new course that was launched through a partnership between the Housing Commission and San Diego City College. The course is called the Homelessness Program for Engaged Educational Resources, or Homelessness Peer Program. And this is a pilot program to help develop the workforce needed for programs and services that help San Diegans experiencing homelessness. Hiring and retaining individuals with the qualifications and the commitment to serve this population is essential. The students in this course will receive specialized education, training, sorry, when a call comes in on my cell phone, it cuts off my iPad for a minute. But the students in this course will receive specialized education, training, and job placement assistance. And I'll point out, this is the first course of its kind that we are aware of anywhere in the country. The first 40 students enrolled in this first course that began just this week will be involved in in-person learning by live video conference now because of safety precautions due to the COVID-19, but surely to change in the future. The Housing Commission is funding this course with a budget of $187,000. The San Diego City College is also leveraging existing San Diego Community College District resources. I want to thank Lisa Jones and her team of the Homelessness Housing Innovations Division for their work on this important pilot program. It's going to give us the workforce that we need. And the we here is not just the Housing Commission, it's the broader community of San Diego. And I think this kind of community engagement is the right thing for us to be doing as well. The third positive report, Madam Chair, since the last board meeting is on October the 6th, the procurement department of the Housing Commission received a national recognition for the fourth year in a row. The procurement department has been recognized with something called the Achievement of Excellence in Procurement Award from the National Procurement Institute. This is the fourth consecutive year that our procurement department has received this award. This award honors organizations that demonstrate excellence by obtaining a high score based on certain set criteria. These criteria measure innovation, professionalism, productivity, e-procurement, and leadership. And as I like to point out, that as a unit of government, it's important not only that we do the right thing, but we do the right thing the right way. And the procurement department ensures that. And I'd like to issue my congratulations to our procurement department, which is under the able leadership of our Vice President, Deborah Fischel-Falk. And Madam Chair, that concludes my report. Be glad to respond to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I think our procurement department is often an unsung hero, and we've heard from them a couple times during presentations, but definitely probably not the most visible or routinely celebrated, but the work they do is so critical. So congratulations, 4 years in a row. That's quite something. And I'm just going to take the opportunity to comment on that peer program. It was, I don't know, a year, 2 years ago, Lisa had just come on board and she had brought up during a conversation we were having workforce and the fact that addressing our homeless population in a way that's really going to have a lasting impact will require a workforce that's San Diego based, that has these skills, and there wasn't a real pipeline for us to do it. And she, when we were kind of talking about it, she had the idea, she had the path. And I mean, to see this coming to fruition is so exciting. The local partnership, I think this is going to be a total game changer. And I'm just continually so impressed with the ingenuity of staff and their ability to take an idea turn it into a policy or a program, and then, you know, see it replicated throughout the country, and all with this incredible level of humility where, you know, we know where these ideas came from, but they're not going to do a victory lap. So I'm going to victory lap for you, Lisa. And I applaud you on this, and I am so excited to see this continuing to make progress. So congratulations on that partnership. Next on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from the special meeting of September 18th, 2020. Do any commissioners want to make any changes to those minutes, or is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
Thank you,
Second.
Commissioner Davis.
Second.
And second, Commissioner Mitchell, thank you. So now we'll go ahead and go through and vote. Vice Chair Klumpner,
Yes.
Commissioner Aiken,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Hester,
Yes.
Commissioner Hubbard,
Yes.
and Commissioner Mitchell.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. We're going to go ahead and move into our action items on our agenda today. The PowerPoint presentations were emailed to the commissioners yesterday and are posted on the Housing Commission's website if you care to follow along. Our first item is item 100, the application for State of California CalHome program funds. There was no public comments on this item, and our Vice President of Single Family Housing Finance will be presenting on this item. So go ahead and whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Chair Benvenuto, Commissioners, Mr. Gentry, and others. My name is Sujata Raman. I'm the Vice President of Single Family Housing Finance for the San Diego Housing Commission's Real Estate Department. Next slide, please. I'm here today to recommend that the Housing Commission approve the submission of an application to the California Department of Housing and Community Development, also known as HCD, for up to $5 million in CalHome program funds for first-time homebuyer program. Authorize the president and CEO or designee to execute all necessary documents and instruments that are necessary and or appropriate to implement these approvals, and authorize such budget amendments as are necessary to allow for the utilization of any CalHome program funds, if any. Next slide, please. The California Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD, issued a notice of funding availability on August 31st, 2020. Applications are due October 29th, 2020. The Housing Commission intends to apply for an allocation of $5 million in CalHome state funds, which are made available from the Affordable Housing Bond Act Trust Fund of 2018. Next slide, please. Funding under this CalHome award will be deployed through the Housing Commission's existing first-time homebuyer program to eligible households earning up to 80% of San Diego's area median income. Eligible households will receive a 3% simple interest deferred payment loan of up to 17% of the purchase price, not to exceed $100,000 per family. To be eligible, the property must be located in the city of San Diego, and the borrowers must meet the Housing Commission's eligibility and underwriting guidelines. The loan will be fully deferred with no payment due until the 30-year maturity date, or if the borrower sells or rents out the property. Next slide, please. An award of $5 million would benefit approximately 60 low-income families, with each family receiving an estimated $66,624 in assistance in the form of a deferred payment loan during the purchase of a home. Upon payoff of these loans, the principal and interest received is recycled back to the first-time homebuyer program and redeployed to assist additional households. Since 2001, the Housing Commission has received 7 CalHome awards totaling $8 million, which has assisted 162 low-income households purchase their first home in the city of San Diego. With the CalHome loan repayments, the Housing Commission has assisted an additional 28 households with utilizing $1.4 million in first-time homebuyer loans. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Do we have any commissioner questions or comments?
Go ahead, Mitch.
I noticed that it said that historically we received about 8 million, I think is what it said. I mean, so we're applying for 5 million, but to date we've received awards totaling 8 million since 01. It just seemed like kind of odd. So are we feeling this to the I guess, are we feeling like they're going to be more giving in the or are we asking for 5 million hoping to get 1 million?
No, we're asking for 5 million, hoping to get the entire 5 million. So to give some background, there hasn't been a new NOFA in CalHome since 2013. So the last 7 years, they have not issued any, and the previous 7 awards were various in amounts, but we've been able to successfully be granted every other application that we submitted in the past. Now, there was one application that a NOFA came out last November that we applied, but HCD informed us that they were oversubscribed, and unfortunately, we weren't granted that. But this is round 2 of this most recent award and NOFA, and we're hoping to get the entire 5 million we're asking.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. I had the same question. Do we have any, sorry, excuse me. The presentation said that you've got we take the principal that's paid back and the interest and we essentially recycle those funds for that program. Do we have any existing funds in that pot? And the kind of the follow-up to that, it said that I think we sent out a notice of available funds on our end back in August, but we're applying today to get those funds. Is that like a zeroed up fund, use or lose dollars? Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think the August application was a different NOFA. So HCD issued a CalHome NOFA for the first time homebuyer program after a 7-year gap last August. We applied for that. That was a separate NOFA. That was round 1. This is a second NOFA that came out this August, and we're hoping, again, as I said, to be awarded pretty much the entire ask, our entire ask. As for reused, you brought up a good question. Yes, so as loans get paid off, which are handled by our loan servicing department, and the monies are budgeted back into a reuse fund, and per the CalHome Awards guidelines, those monies have to be reused in making new first-time homebuyer loans back to homeowners in the community. We always have a small amount sitting in our funds there, and as the payoffs come in, we tend to issue new loans to new home buyers.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Madam Chair, if I could, this is an item that could be considered routine enough to go to consent, but it was my wish for the board to understand that in addition to the 4 very large programs we operate, which are vouchers, real estate development and ownership, real estate finance, and homelessness services, we have a number of smaller programs. I call them boutique programs, this being one of them. And that does a lot of good in the community, but it doesn't always get noticed because of the small size, small scope. And as Sujata said, the erratic funding that may come from the sources, in this case, the state. But I wanted you all to understand that we do provide home ownership assistance as money is available. And we've diverted we've allocated some of the monies that come from the city council for home ownership purposes going forward too. So there are certain city council members for whom this is a very important program too. But it was important to me for you all to hear this morning to understand that we do have a number of programs beyond those big 4. And what would be very happy to do is at some point in the future, do a workshop with this board on exactly how this home ownership program works, how long it's been going on, and how many folks we've served.
I think at some point that would be a welcome presentation. Yeah, let's definitely keep that in mind. Thank you for the presentation. I'm struck by how a first-time home buyer navigating this space in this current environment must feel overwhelmed, particularly one who is seeking the help of the Housing Commission to do so. So I think this also highlights the importance of why the Housing Commission does engage in those middle income housing discussions, because just focusing on the subsidized and then knowing that, we've got policies that help balance certain things out with regard to, inclusionary and when we're building more market rate. Fact of the matter is, folks who are trying to buy a home right now, even with the help of the Housing Commission, which is probably a bit of a game changer for them, are going to find themselves in a really tough market. So it behooves us to continue to think about the full housing spectrum and how, when folks are graduating out of those subsidized units, that there's product out there for them to reasonably move their families into and continue to build those roots. So I'm very glad to see this program. I'm very glad at the aggressive application of 5 million. Look forward to finding out how that goes. Do we have a motion on this item?
Motion to move.
Is that
Second.
Commissioner Hubbard?
Yes.
Moved by Commissioner Hubbard, second by Vice Chair Klempner. We'll go ahead and vote. Vice Chair Klempner,
Yes.
Commissioner Akers,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
yes,
Commissioner Hester,
Yes.
Commissioner Hubbard,
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Aye.
I'm also a yes on this. That passes unanimously. Thanks so much, everybody. Our next item, 101, is the loan recommendation and preliminary bond authorization for Ulric Street Apartments 2. We did receive one public comment on this item from Mary Jane Jagodzinski, the Senior Vice President of Housing and Real Estate Development for Community Housing Works, which I will now read into the record. And she wrote, "Good morning, Ms. Chair, Commissioners, Mr. Gentry, and staff. On behalf of Community Housing Works, I would like to thank you for considering the loan recommendation and preliminary bond authorization for Ulric Street Apartments 2. This future development will provide 59 senior affordable housing apartments reserved for households earning 30% to 60% of the area median income. 6 of these units will be reserved for seniors experiencing homelessness. In addition to the SDHC loan, 59 non-permanent supportive housing federal project-based vouchers have been preliminarily assigned to the development. The 1.4 acre site is located in the Linda Vista neighborhood, adjacent to Community Housing Works Ulric 1 development, also supported by SDHC, thereby establishing an intergenerational hub of new construction, sustainable and affordable homes in this central San Diego neighborhood. I, along with Kelly Moden, VP of Development, and Anna McMaster, Project Manager, are available for questions." Thank you, Mary Jane. That concludes our public comments on this item, and the Housing Commission's Vice President of Multifamily Housing Finance will be presenting. Whenever you're ready, Colin.
Good morning. Okay, so the item before you today is a request to take the initial steps to issue tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds and approve a $4,075,000 residual receipt loan for the acquisition and construction of Ulric Street Apartments 2. Next slide, please. Staff is requesting that the Housing Commission approve the proposed residual receipts loan of up to $4,075,000 to Linda Vista Housing Associates LP to finance the acquisition and new construction of Ulric Street Apartments 2, which I will be referring to as Ulric 2 for the rest of the presentation. The property was located at 2601 through 2641 Ulric Street, and as mentioned earlier in the public comment, and will consist of 59 units that will remain affordable for 55 years for low and very low income seniors, and includes 6 units for seniors experiencing homelessness, plus the 1 unrestricted manager's unit. Next slide, please. We are requesting authorization for the Housing Commission's President and Chief Executive Officer or designee to execute all necessary documents in a form approved by General Counsel and take all necessary actions upon advice of General Counsel, as well as adjust the financing terms, provided that the $4,075,000 loan amount may not increase, if needed, to substitute other funding sources with other available funds as deemed appropriate and contingent upon budget availability. Next slide, please. Further, to recommend the Housing Authority issue a bond inducement resolution for up to $23,852,443 million in tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds, as well as authorize an application and subsequent applications, if necessary, to CIDLAC, and approve the bond financing team of Quint and Thimig as bond counsel and CSG Advisors as bond financial advisor, and as well allow the president and CEO to adjust documents as needed and upon counsel's advice or bond counsel's advice. Next slide, please. Lastly, that the Housing Commission recommend that the City Council hold a Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act public hearing and adopt a resolution approving the issuance of up to approximately $23.8 million in multifamily housing revenue bonds. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, the proposed project is a new construction 60-unit development located at 2601 Ulric Street in the Linda Vista Community Plan area in Council District 7. The proposed development will contain 59 one-bedroom units that are affordable and one unrestricted manager's unit. 6 of the units, as mentioned earlier, will be reserved for seniors experiencing homelessness, and all 59 units will remain affordable at ranges of 30 to 60% of AMI for 55 years. The Housing Commission has previously awarded 59 federal project-based housing vouchers through the Housing First San Diego, which is our homelessness action plan. Next slide, please. So the site currently has 16 existing unrestricted units that were built in approximately 1941 and will be demolished as part of the new development. Of the 16, 10 of the existing residents have qualified for permanent relocation under the Uniform Relocation Act, while the remaining 6 residents did not qualify or move in and were notified of this. The developer, Community Housing Works, is making all efforts to assist them in finding replacement housing. Moreover, the developer will comply with all applicable relocation laws. Next slide, please. As stated, the developer is Community Housing Works. Founded in 1988, Community Housing Works owns over 3,600 apartments in 42 communities across the state and serves more than 9,000 working families, children, and seniors. CHW is a local award-winning nonprofit affordable housing developer that has been awarded loans from the Housing Commission in the past and is currently in full compliance with all SDHC loans. Next slide, please. The members of the development team are listed on this slide. As stated, the developer of the project is Community Housing Works. The general contractor will be Sun Country Builders. Studio B Architects will serve as the architect, and the property manager is planned to be Con-Am Management. A lender and tax credit investor will be selected at a later date. Next slide, please. So this slide shows a site map of the development. The site is bordered to the west by the Linda Vista Community Park and Genesee Avenue, and additionally is a few blocks north of Linda Vista Road in Council District 7. The site's just a few half mile or so away from the 163 as well. Next slide, please. The total development cost of the project will be approximately $32 million, which equates to $533,000 per unit, of which $280,000 is attributed to construction costs. Now, the development entails demolition of 16 existing unrestricted units, permanent relocation, and additionally will require the payment of prevailing wages. So these items have contributed to the total development cost. Notable sources of funding include a permanent loan, tax credit equity, loans from housing and community development, as well as the Housing Commission, if approved today, and a deferred developer fee. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, units will be restricted at 30 and 60% of area median income for the next 55 years, and rents will range from $649 per month to $1,299 per month for the units for seniors. Eligible households and individuals will have incomes ranging from $27,750 to $55,440 based on the 2020 rent and income chart. Next slide, please. Should this be approved today, this would be presented to the Housing Authority and City Council on October 27th. And when the developer receives an award of bonds, we anticipate bringing this item back for final bond-related approvals in April of 2021. The developer could then close financing and start construction the same month, and they expect to complete the project in September of 2022. Next slide, please. To summarize the developer's request, you're considering approvals to take the preliminary steps to issue up to approximately $23.8 million in tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds, as well as approve a Housing Commission loan of $4,075,000. Approval of the bond issuance and TEFRA resolutions does not commit the Housing Authority to issue bonds. The bonds would not constitute a debt of the city, and if bonds are ultimately issued for the project, the bonds will not financially obligate the city, the Housing Authority, or the Housing Commission, because security for the repayment of the bonds will be limited to specific private revenue sources of the project. Next slide, please. I appreciate your time. This concludes my presentation. I'm available to answer any questions you may have, as well as representatives from Community Housing Works.
Thank you, Colin. Do we have any commissioner questions? Any commissioner comments? Okay, sorry, there's a nice conversation going on in my background. I think we are ready to entertain a motion if there's no questions or comments.
I move to approve.
Commissioner Davis,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Akers. Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Vice Chair Klumpner,
Yes.
Commissioner Akers,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Hester,
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Hubbard, Commissioner Hubbard,
Aye.
and Commissioner Mitchell.
Aye.
I'm also a yes, so that carries unanimously. Thank you. Our next item is 102, the preliminary bond authorization for Fourth Corner Apartments. There are no public comments submitted for this item, and we'll be hearing again from Colin Miller whenever you're ready.
Thank you. So this item, the item before you today is a request to take the initial steps to issue multifamily, tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds and taxable revenue bonds for the acquisition and construction of the Fourth Corner Apartments. Next slide, please. Staff is requesting that the Housing Commission recommend the Housing Authority issue a bond inducement resolution for up to $32.8 million in tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds and taxable bonds, as well as authorize an application and subsequent applications if necessary to SDLAC, and approve the financing team of Squire, Patton, and Boggs as bond counsel and Ross Financial as financial advisor. I will note that of the 32.8, approximately 27 million would be tax exempt bonds and 5.8 would be taxable bonds. Next slide, please. I would also request authorization for the Housing Commission's president and CEO or designee to execute necessary documents in a form approved by General Counsel and take all necessary actions upon advice of General Counsel and or bond counsel. Further, that I recommend that the Housing Commission recommend to the City Council that they hold a Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act public hearing and adopt a resolution approving the issuance of up to 27 million in multifamily housing revenue bonds for the Fourth Corner Apartments. Next slide, please. The proposed project is a new construction 75-unit development located at 4021 through 4061 Fairmont Avenue in the City Heights Community Plan area in Council District 9. The proposed development will contain 55 two-bedroom units, 20 three-bedroom units, and 1 unrestricted manager's unit. The 74 affordable units will remain affordable at 30 to 60% of AMI for the next 55 years. Now, I'd like to take a moment and point out that this project is unique in that it will leverage approximately 18.4 million in land and capital contributions from Price Charities. And that represents more than 45% of the total development cost. This is an extraordinary contribution of private capital to an affordable housing development that we rarely see. And I want to note the sizable contribution that Price Charities has made to this project. Future residents of the property will enjoy a community space complete with lounge, a full kitchen, laundry facilities, and a computer lab. Outdoor recreational areas will feature barbecue grills and shade-covered seating. Of course, floors 2 through 4 will be serviced by elevators. Additionally, the development will be built to Greenpoint Rated's gold standard and include a solar photovoltaic system, solar panels. Next slide, please. The architect has provided the following rendering of the development. Next slide, please. This slide shows the site map of the development. The previously mentioned community space can be seen on the left-hand side, while parking for the development can be seen on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. The developer of the project is Wakeland Housing Development Corporation, a nationally recognized nonprofit developer. The general contractor will be Sun Country Builders, and the property manager will be Con-Am Management. The rest of the development team is listed on this slide. Next slide, please. Now, as seen on this slide, the site is located in the City Heights neighborhood along Fairmont Avenue, with La Maestra Community Health Centers directly across the street, as well as Highland Landis Park and the City Heights Recreation Center 2 blocks to the south of the development. Next slide, please. The total development cost of the project will be approximately $40.5 million, which equates to around $540,000 per unit, of which $359,000 is attributed to construction cost. Now, at the request of members of the City Heights community, the developer is building the units that are 150 square feet larger than required by the Tax Credit Allocation Committee, as well as 29 more parking spaces than are required by code, also at the request of the community. These items have contributed to the increased construction costs, but have met the requests of the City Heights area. Sources of funding include permanent loan, tax credit equity, as well as the Price Charities capital and land contributions I mentioned earlier. And I'd like to point out that no Housing Commission loan funds are being requested for these new affordable units. Next slide, please. Units will be restricted 30 through 60% of area median income for the next 55 years, with rents ranging from $780 to $1,802 per month for the 2 and 3 bedroom units. Eligible households and individuals will have incomes ranging from $31,200 through $69,300 based on the 2020 rent and income chart. Next slide, please. Pending a CIDLAC award, we anticipate bringing this item back for final bond-related approvals in March of 2021. The developer expects to close financing and start construction no later than July of 2021 and complete renovations in December of 2022. Next slide, please. To summarize the developer's request, you are considering approvals to take the preliminary steps to issue up to $27 million in tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds and up to $5.8 million in taxable bonds. As stated earlier, no Housing Commission loan funds are being requested for this development. Approval of the bond issuance and TEFRA resolutions does not commit the Housing Authority to issue bonds. The bonds would not constitute a debt of the city. And if bonds are ultimately issued for the project, the bonds will not financially obligate the city, the Housing Authority, or the Housing Commission, because security for the repayment of the bonds will be limited to specific private revenue sources of the project. Next slide, please. Thank you for your time. This concludes my presentation. I, as well as representatives from Wakeland, are here to answer any questions that you may have about the development.
Thank you, Colin. Commissioners, questions, comments?
I have a comment. I just want to express our gratitude to Price Charities for the contribution here. We don't see that every day, and it's a fantastic way to have a great impact on this community and very generous. And so I just want to say that we certainly appreciate that. I also appreciate the developer adding more parking than is required. However, I am kind of the mind that I like the climate action goals and the more flexibility that we've gotten on that, but I understand that this is part of getting community buy-in, which is also very important for these things, and it's great to see when we can get that. So thank you all.
Commissioner Mitchell?
I too want to echo again what Commissioner Clumpner said. The Price family and the Price Charities have continued to embrace the enhancements of certain neighborhoods in San Diego, and it's exemplary. And on the parking aspect, I want to go a little further. The climate action goals, have been clearly, set up with clear objectives. And what I hope we don't get into is that we often see this imbalance in terms of parking, where one developer will go a little further, and I think we are moving towards where most developers are, which is less parking. People are going to have there's a new generation of people coming up who will use ride shares and transit, and so just hopefully we're going to see some sort of a stable situation with regard to parking. That there's fewer parking, that's great. But in this instance, they decided to go a little further because that's what the neighbors want. It's going to be a really push and pull as we start to look at density. When you add more density, everybody's going to say, we want more parking, which sometimes may make sense, but in some instances, people moving into the units may not ever own a car or want a car because they're going to. So just something I hope the Housing Commission can provide some guidance on as we move forward with projects like this. This is a wonderful project.
Thank you, commissioners. I'm inclined to agree on all those points, but it's always exciting to see new partners in these ventures. Not that Price is new to this effort, but very glad for their participation and the generosity. Do we have any further questions, comments, or is there a motion?
Motion.
I'll move to approve.
I think Okay, there was a motion by Vice Chair Klempner and seconded by Commissioner Hubbard. Is that right?
Nestor,
Yes.
Okay. We'll go ahead and vote. Vice Chair Klempner,
Yes.
Commissioner Akers,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Hester,
yes.
Commissioner Hubbard,
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Aye.
and I'll also be voting in favor, so the motion carries unanimously. Great. Item 103 is the preliminary bond authorization for Wakeland Price UB Apartments. We had no public comments, and we'll be hearing again. It's the Colin show today, so Colin, take it away.
It's a great problem to have that we have a lot of projects to bring forward for your consideration today. The final project before you is a request for to take the initial steps to issue multifamily housing revenue bonds for the acquisition and construction of Wakeland Price UB Apartments. Next slide, please. Staff is requesting that the Housing Commission recommend that the Housing Authority issue a bond inducement resolution for up to $25.4 million in tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds and taxable bonds, as well as authorize an application and subsequent applications if necessary to CIDLAC, and approve the financing team of Squire, Patton, and Boggs as bond counsel and Ross Financial as financial advisor. Next slide, please. Further, to authorize the Housing Commission's president and CEO or designee to execute necessary documents in a form approved by General Counsel and take all necessary actions upon advice of General Counsel and or bond counsel. Additionally, that the Housing Commission recommend that the City Council hold a Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act public hearing and adopt a resolution approving the issuance of up to $21.4 million in tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds. Next slide, please. So the proposed project is a new construction 60-unit development located at 4390 University Avenue in the City Heights Community Plan Area, Council District 9. The proposed development will contain 45 two-bedroom units, 15 three-bedroom units, and 1 unrestricted manager's unit. The 59 affordable units will remain affordable at AMIs ranging from 30 to 60% for the next 55 years. Similar to the previously heard project, this is unique in that it's going to leverage more than $16.3 million in land and capital contributions from Price Charities. This represents more than 50% of the total development cost. So again, substantial contribution. Future residents of the property will enjoy a community space complete with lounge, a full kitchen, and computer lab. Outdoor recreational areas will feature barbecue pits and shade-covered seating, as well as laundry facilities and elevators serving floors 2 through 4. Next slide, please. The architect has provided the following rendering of the development. Next slide. And this slide shows the site map of the development with 44th on the eastern boundary and University Avenue on the south. The previously mentioned community space can be seen on the right-hand side or the right-hand side of the slide, while the parking can be seen on the left-hand part of the slide. Next slide, please. The developer of the project is Wakeland Housing Development Corporation, a nationally recognized nonprofit developer. The general contractor is Sun Country Builders, and the property manager will be Con-Am Management. Other members of the team are listed, while the construction perm lender will be determined at a later date. Next slide, please. As seen on this slide, the site is located in the City Heights neighborhood along University Avenue with La Maestra Community Health Centers, Highland Landis Park, and City Heights Recreation Center, all within 2 blocks of the development. It's worth noting that this project and the previously heard item are both within the same city block, so they're very close to each other. So there's some economies of scale that we're pleased to see. Next slide, please. The total development cost of the project will be approximately $32.3 million, which equates to around $538,000 per unit, of which $342,000 is attributed to construction costs. Like the previous project, at the request of the members of the City Heights community, the developer is building units that are 150 square feet larger than required by TCAC, as well as 24 more parking spaces than are required by code, also at the request of the community. These items have contributed to the increased construction cost. Sources of funding include a permanent loan, tax credit equity, and the aforementioned Price Charities capital, as well as land contributions. And I'd like to note again that no Housing Commission funds are requested for these units either. Next slide, please. As I stated earlier, the units will be restricted at AMIs ranging from 30 to 60% of area median income for the next 55 years, and rents will range from $780 for a 2-bedroom to $1,802 for a 3-bedroom unit at 60% of AMI. Eligible households and individuals will have incomes ranging from $31,200 to $69,300 based on the 2020 rent and income chart. Next slide, please. Pending a SDLAC award of bonds, we anticipate bringing this item back for final bond-related approvals in March of 2021. And as with the previous development, the developer expects to close financing and start construction no later than July of 2021 and complete construction in December of 2022. Next slide, please. To summarize the developer's request, you are considering approvals to take the preliminary steps to issue up to $21.4 million in tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds and up to $4 million in taxable bonds. As stated earlier, no Housing Commission loan funds are being requested for this development. Approval of the bond issuance and TEFRA resolutions does not commit the Housing Authority to issue bonds, and the bonds would not constitute a debt of the city. If the bonds are ultimately issued for the project, the bonds will not financially obligate the city, the Housing Authority, or the Housing Commission, because security for the repayment of the bonds will be limited to specific private revenue sources of the project. Next slide, please. I appreciate your time this morning. This does conclude my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, along with representatives from Wakeland.
Thank you, Colin. Commissioners, questions, comments?
I'll ask a question just because we're seeing this twice in one meeting. None of us, I think, are surprised to see Price doing great work in City Heights for as long as we've known them. Does Wakeland and Price, they have a wonderful relationship? I imagine these projects came together by their partnership. Can we just talk briefly about that?
So regarding that, I'd like to turn that over to Peter Armstrong with Wakeland.
Hi, good morning, commissioners. Yeah, thanks for the question. Wakeland has been working with Price on these 2 projects probably for like the last year and a half. We've been kind of talking about goals and mission and those good things probably for about 9 months, and then the last 4 or 5 months we've really been working on implementing vision and goals. Price has been working on these 2 projects for substantially longer. So for the Fourth Corner property, they probably acquired the sites approximately 5 years ago, and so they've been working on community development in City Heights. As you probably are aware, they did the East Block project with Chelsea. And so this was, kind of put on hold while they're working on that, but that project is now under construction. And so they're, turning their focus to these properties. So long story short, they've been at it for quite some time. Wakeland is a little bit new to the dance, but we've been doing it for about 1.5 years while working together really constructively with Price.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Okay, any other commissioner questions or comments? I do have a process question, Colin. I saw March 21, the select TCAC meetings are going to be hot and heavy with a lot of San Diego applications. Can you help me understand? It feels to me like we're putting a number of our own San Diego projects in competition with one another potentially. Can you help me kind of understand how that all works out together?
Yeah, so there is in prior years, the SDLAC allocation of 4% bonds was not competitive. And only in this past year has that happened. 2020 has had all sorts of surprises for us. And with the bonds going competitive, I think what we're seeing is as part of the development process, and to Peter's point, it takes a number of years to get a deal from the initial idea all the way through the groundbreaking and housing individuals. And so I think what's happening is we have a pipeline of projects that are moving through the pipeline, and we're going to have to adjust as we move forward. But we have deals that have, in this case, the 2 deals with Price Charities, massive amounts of private capital coming in. That's really unique. And so, are we competing with ourselves? I guess technically, but I wouldn't worry about it as much.
Mr. Gentry? Thank you, Colin.
I think what has happened is that the demand for the 4%ers has finally come in more than the supply is there. So we're not creating the competition. The competition is going to happen whether we're in there or not. And for the Housing Commission to arbitrarily exclude one from another when we don't necessarily know which might compete the best would inhibit the process. So our feeling is that we should support these developers who are trying to do good by San Diego, rather than arbitrarily restricting somebody who, in favor of somebody who might lose out to another city like LA or Oakland or Sacramento itself. So is there competition? Yes, but that's kind of beyond our ability to influence.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, my hope is that, you know, if the commission and housing authority are supportive of these applications, that, you know, we just be as technically supportive as we can so that the block of San Diego applications have the best chance of success against competitor areas. I'm just kind of thinking about the transition to 4%ers becoming competitive. The state's budget, you know, we went from a massive surplus where Governor Newsom dumped like $500 million more into affordable housing finance. That's not coming in 21 and probably 22 and 23. So just thinking about that strategy for how we support and follow through with the support that we provide our applicants, really making sure that they stand a good chance. Go ahead, Rick.
I'll point out as well that the fact that the 4%ers have become competitive is not something that even the state can control. The allocation of tax credits from the federal government, both the 9%ers and the 4%ers, are governed by a formula that comes out of the Congress. And so the only way to make this non-competitive without arbitrarily reducing the number of properties competing is by getting the cap increased. And so the cap, in my opinion, is lower than it should be. That's a function of national priorities, which can change with different administrations, which I guess is an indirect way of saying we hope it'll go up sometime soon. We don't know that it will.
I appreciate that. And I am in no way encouraging the commission to have less applicants. I just wanted to kind of understand, you know, how we're setting our applicants up for success.
And there are a lot of things we do that are not commonsensical. So your questions are great. Like every business, we have our own internal logic, and it's not always understandable till you explain out the logic itself.
And sometimes even then, I don't need to totally get the logic. You know, it's always a maze of more acronyms and more math that I wasn't anticipating. So that concludes my questions. Unless there's anything else from any other commissioners, I think we can entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
As Commissioner Davis, do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Mitchell, thank you. Go ahead and vote. Vice Chair Klempner.
Yes.
Commissioner Akers.
Yes.
Commissioner Davis.
Yes.
Commissioner Hester.
Yes.
Commissioner Hubbard.
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Aye.
And I'm also in favor. Carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Colin. I hope you have an opportunity to catch your breath.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move into item 104. My dog has lost her mind. I'm sorry. Item 104, the approval of a contract between the Housing Commission, and PATH to operate the City of San Diego's coordinated street outreach program. We received one public comment from Zach Schlegel, PATH Senior Director of Public Policy, and I will read that into the record. PATH, People Assisting the Homeless, greatly appreciates the opportunity offered by the Housing Commission to operate the city's coordinated street outreach program and respectfully asks for the board's support. Since PATH began serving the homeless in 1983, street outreach has been a defining characteristic of our organization and what has set us apart from other providers. We know that field-based outreach leads to better and more long-standing outcomes for clients. Our team brings a diverse set of skills and backgrounds to each client encounter, enabling us to specifically address what may be impeding that person's ability to secure housing. We get to know our clients and our communities inside and out as we work towards a shared goal of ending homelessness. We have done this successfully in San Diego since our arrival in 2013. Whether it's downtown, North Park, City Heights, or La Mesa, our team builds durable relationships with community leaders and clients to ensure that the solutions we pursue align with the community itself. If given the chance to run the coordinated street outreach program, we will apply these successful tactics across the city to make a significant lasting impact on homelessness in all neighborhoods. That concludes the public comments on this item, and Senior Vice President of Homeless Housing Innovations, Lisa Jones, will be presenting. Lisa?
Good morning. Good morning, Chair Benvenuto, and good morning, Commissioners. I'm Lisa Jones, Senior Vice President of Homeless Housing Innovations Division, and with me is Jonathan Herrera, Senior Project and Policy Advisor. Next slide, please. Over the past few years, focused conversations have occurred regarding the role and function of street-based outreach services and the need to enhance existing outreach resources. The City of San Diego's Community Action Plan on Homelessness, which the City Council accepted in October 2019, identified the reduction of unsheltered homelessness by 50% as a near-term 3-year goal. In addition, one of the key items for consideration identified in the plan was to develop an outreach framework that coordinates citywide efforts more effectively and moves the approach from contact-based to housing-focused outreach. This type of outreach relies on service providers with expertise in social work to carry out core outreach functions. In support of this goal, the city also took 2 separate actions in June to allocate just over $1.7 million for the purpose of creating a coordinated street outreach program, as well as an outreach coordinator position through the San Diego Housing Commission to administer the implementation and operation of this program. Next slide. The proposed service model addresses many of the recommendations in the Community Action Plan, which identifies street outreach as an essential element of the city's homelessness crisis response system. This effort also makes a transition in the city's delivery of street outreach services to a more client-centric and housing-focused model. The program design, funding, and leverage resources provide the infrastructure necessary to deploy rapid crisis response teams, as well as to maintain ongoing street-based case management activities. In addition, the program is aligned with the practices outlined in the Regional Task Force on the Homeless's policy guidelines for regional response for addressing homelessness and encampments. Program operations will be informed by and aligned with the ongoing policy developments and trainings that the Regional Task Force facilitates in collaboration with the City of San Diego, County of San Diego, and the Housing Commission. Next slide.
On July 29th, the San Diego Housing Commission began a competitive procurement process for identifying an operator by issuing a request for proposals. The RFP was posted on both the City and Housing Commission Planet Bids vendor portal systems. At the proposal deadline, 3 responses were received. Next slide, please. PATH is an experienced homeless service provider and has existing experience and success in conducting outreach services, making them a strong partner to operate the city's coordinated street outreach program. The organization has been serving individuals experiencing homelessness for more than 30 years and has been active in the San Diego region since 2013, serving more than 1,100 individuals experiencing homelessness throughout the San Diego region on an annual basis. In addition, PATH operates Connection Housing, a city-funded interim shelter and supportive services center in downtown San Diego, which provides 134 interim units, 16 units for individuals with special needs, and 73 permanent supportive studio units. In conjunction with the County of San Diego, PATH has also operationalized specialized street outreach programs, which focus on engaging the community's most vulnerable and often medically fragile individuals experiencing homelessness. As the operator of the region's Whole Person Wellness and Health Homes program, PATH has refined its approach to engaging frequent users of the healthcare system or Medi-Cal beneficiaries who are experiencing chronic medical and mental health conditions. Next slide, please. In 2018, PATH partnered with the Office of Council President Georgette Gomez and Councilmember Chris Ward, along with community and civic stakeholders in the Mid-City area, to develop a pilot program to employ an innovative approach to conducting street outreach. The elements that contributed to the pilot's program's success were highlighted in PATH's proposal and incorporated into the service model. These critical elements include the use of a neighborhood-specific strategy that was informed by the unique demographics and needs of the unsheltered population, as well as being proactive in engaging community stakeholders, such as local residents and business owners. Excelling at problem-solving activities with a whatever-it-takes approach to addressing a client's barriers to accessing shelter, supportive services, and housing resources. Employing qualified and trained professionals equipped with the necessary skill set to successfully intervene and de-escalate heightened situations, conduct mental and behavioral health assessments, as well as case-manage clients using motivational interviewing and trauma-informed techniques. And finally, knowledge of and access to resources that are relevant to the target population's needs, as well as providing the programmatic resources to quickly address barriers as they arise. Done consistently over extended periods of time, these service elements have been demonstrated to improve rapport between staff and client, as well as to progress clients in their ability to exit homelessness into permanent or longer-term housing. Next slide, please. The proposed street outreach program incorporates nationally recognized best practices and shifts the focus of the city's outreach resources. Input from leading industry experts, including Oracle Consulting, was utilized to develop a program model that aligned with proven interventions, emerging practices, and local policy developments. These reflect the desired orientation and outcome of the city's outreach services and align with the community action plan. An overarching element of this service model is the focus on the quality of client engagement and the resulting outcomes versus the quantity of client engagements. The program will employ a neighborhood-based approach, which entails a tailored response based on the unique needs and demographics of the communities and sheltered population. A foundational shift in outreach activities is also facilitated in the program design through the implementation of street-based case management. All of the services and resources will be provided in alignment with Housing First principles in a low barrier and accessible manner. Staff will also support efforts to help unsheltered clients meet their basic needs while prioritizing efforts to facilitate housing placements and transitions to other longer-term housing options. Next slide, please. The coordinated outreach program will consist of two distinct yet complementary teams, each with a specific focus, set of duties, and outcomes. The mobile homeless response team will prioritize engaging clients on the by name list, group of individuals who are most vulnerable and potentially connected to a housing resource. The Regional Task Force on the Homeless administers this list. This team will provide ongoing intensive street-based case management services for prioritized clients, utilizing staff trained in crisis intervention and motivational interviewing techniques. Staff will also provide system navigation assistance to address any barriers that clients are experiencing in obtaining and transitioning to both permanent and longer-term housing. This may include assistance with obtaining identification, access to primary care, and employment resources. The rapid response team will focus activities in areas with known concentrations of individuals experiencing unsheltered homelessness. Engagements are intentional and revolve around immediate intervention and problem-solving discussions, while striving to improve the client's sense of safety and assisting them in meeting their basic needs. A unique aspect of this service component is a built-in functionality to incorporate community-based referrals in conjunction with data from various sources to determine resource allocation. Next slide, please. Program staff will work alongside existing outreach activities, as well as leverage resources from other programs PATH currently administers, including whole person wellness, enhanced outreach teams, and the Mid-City Outreach Program. Program staff will receive support and direction from the Senior Outreach Coordinator employed by the San Diego Housing Commission as part of the citywide strategic approach to the effective use of funded outreach resources. The Housing Commission is in the process of concluding its recruitment efforts and anticipate having the position filled in the coming weeks. The program will consist of a total of 17 frontline staff members and 2 senior-level PATH administrators. Operations will occur 7 days a week, except for city-observed holidays. Weekend and after-hours coverage will also be provided. Provider staff work closely with the Housing Commission and the city to facilitate community referrals for outreach services and the primary goal of all outreach activities is to facilitate housing placements, with the initial goal of 65 exits to permanent housing over 12 months, which will be adjusted to align with the 8-month term of the contract. The Housing Commission will also monitor several performance metrics to establish a baseline and inform the development of future outcome measures and potential performance improvements. The program operator will monitor and report on data related to client engagements and progression, exits to housing, and longer-term destinations, as well as resource referrals. Next slide, please.
In recognition of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, operations will be modified to incorporate the public health guidelines issued by local, state, and federal authorities. The contractor will align practices with the homeless service guidelines and outreach practices provided by both the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Personal protective equipment will also be readily available and utilized for both clients and staff. The County of San Diego Universal Screening Tool and associated workflow will also be utilized in the event that provider staff engage a COVID-19 symptomatic client to connect the individual with the region's temporary lodging resources. Next slide, please. Funding for the initial program term of 8 months is budgeted for $1,077,643. Please be advised that the funding source that has been updated to the City of San Diego's Homeless Strategies Department, which reflects a change from the board report. This amount includes the Housing Commission's administrative cost as well as a prorated operating budget. The initial contract term also includes $70,585 in one-time expenditures for related program startup, consisting of $33,000 for vehicle acquisition, license, and registration, $23,000 for laptops, cell phones, and tablets, $9,000 for homeless management information system user licensing, and $5,585 for personal protective equipment and hygiene supplies. The description of the startup costs differ from what is indicated in the staff report, as Housing Commission staff have since adjusted and consolidated similar expenses. Future option years will be exercised contingent on the availability of the necessary funds by the City of San Diego. Next slide. The proposed memorandum of understanding between the City of San Diego and the Housing Commission provides the administrative framework for the oversight of the city's coordinated street outreach program and details each party's responsibilities. The Housing Commission is responsible for the following: administration and oversight of the subcontract agreement, direct day-to-day general management, administration, and oversight of the coordinated street outreach program in the City of San Diego, including coordinated other city-funded and leveraged outreach activities, collecting monthly reporting on program performance, and accommodating specialized data requests from the city. Next slide. The city is responsible for providing funding in the total amount of $1.5 million in reoccurring 2-month advance payments to fund program operations, ongoing maintenance and operation of the Survey 123 application under the capacity that they have to do so, as well as providing related technical assistance until such time as the Clarity HMIS functionality for geocoding is in place, exploring the expansion of the Get It Done application to serve as a mechanism to receive, review, and refer applicable community requests for outreach services. Next slide.
Today, we are asking the Housing Commission to recommend that the Housing Authority take the following actions as detailed in the staff report and on the following slides. Authorize the execution of an agreement with People Assisting the Homeless to operate the City of San Diego's coordinated street outreach program for a 1-year term in the amount of $1,425,000 with a 1-year option to renew at the Housing Commission's sole discretion, in which the initial contract term will be prorated for an 8-month period from November 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021 in the amount of $1,027,643. Authorize the Housing Commission's President and Chief Executive Officer or designee to execute all documents and instruments necessary and or appropriate to implement these approvals in a form and format approved by General Counsel, and to take such action necessary and or appropriate to implement these approvals. Next slide, please. Authorize the Housing Commission's President and CEO or designee to substitute funding sources and or increase compensation by not more than 20% of the total agreement amount for the proposed budget, if necessary, without further action by the Housing Commission's Board of Commissioners, but only if and to the extent that funds are determined to be available for such purposes. Finally, we are also asking the Housing Commission to recommend that both the Housing Authority and the City Council authorize the execution of a memorandum of understanding between the City of San Diego and the Housing Commission for the oversight and administration of the city's coordinated street outreach program. Next slide, please. That concludes our presentation. Lisa and I are joined today by Brian Gruters, Associate Director of Outreach with PATH San Diego, and we're available for any comments or questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions, any comments?
Sure. This is, I just had a quick question for Jonathan and Lisa. When I was reading the materials, I do think there's some confusion about what the services are that are being provided instead of just trying to find housing for those who are homeless and living on the streets. But you mentioned in the presentation, there's a difference between the 123 survey 123, and then the Get It Done survey, and looking at the expansion of the Get It Done. Can you give us a brief description of the differences between the two?
Yes.
that you're utilizing?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we're really focusing on as far as collecting data to create data-driven decisions is understanding where people are within the community. So being able to track those hotspots, and also understanding how many times we interact with the same individual in the same place. So how much are they moving around? This software and this sort of tracking is still developing, but right now there's an app called Survey 123 that the city administers, where we're able, when the outreach workers are out, to drop a pin in a location to show where they're engaging most frequently. So we can tell by council district where engagements are happening. The Get It Done app is really the app, as you know, that Environmental Services uses and has been quite useful for the city in people being able to request responses to needs. We'd like to, our intention is to explore with the city to see whether or not the Get It Done app can also be repurposed for that homeless response team component of this work, to be able to respond to requests when issues arise. Business owners, community members identify someone in need that needs an urgent response.
Okay, so that's what the clarifying. So it's basically, if you see somebody doing stuff that's homeless, that's setting up and doing something that's not necessarily appropriate or legal, you want to use the app to make that call instead of the 911 emergency system. So
obviously, if there's significant criminal behavior and they look like they're an immediate danger to others or potentially themselves, we want to call emergency services. But there's that in between where there's clearly significant need. They need some quick intervention, but it's not at a 911 level. So we want to reduce that burden on 911 and have those social work response be that urgent response.
Yeah, and then just one follow-up, one last thing on that, because it does make sense. If you see someone that is obviously in need of some psychiatric care, you could use the app, and then that might ensure that the right level of response is sent as opposed to a full police level response.
Right. And as we roll this out and look at implementing this piece and this component of the work, we'll have to make sure that the messaging and the communication to the community is really clear too, obviously.
Mr. Gentry, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes, please. Two points I'd like to emphasize here. The first is, at this point, the only uniform across the board outreach program done in the city is the police hot team, the homelessness outreach team. And it's been a concern of certain members of council for a long time that if the first entity that shows up to deal with the homelessness situation is a uniformed officer, it can produce some reactions that are not wanted. It also makes sense to let the police be police personnel, do police work, and somebody else do social work. All too often, the police wind up doing social work that is stretches them and not what they're trained to do generally, but also may have a contraindicatory effect on the person they're reaching out to. So this was in particular a concern of a couple of members of council, both Council President Gomez and Council Member Montgomery, who were interested in a different approach that would be more of a social services outreach. And that's a major reason we're bringing this to you. A second point is to, again, remind the board, this is a good indication of what I call the housing authority's practice over the last 10 years or so of leading from behind on the homelessness issue here. We have basically done what we've been asked to do that we can pay for from various people in the city asking, all the way from members of this board to, in more particular, the city administration or city council, beginning with then Mayor Jerry Sanders in January of 2010, asking us to take over administration of what was the then winter shelter program. So I want you all to know that this is how we have incrementally over the last 10 plus years become more and more of a player in the homelessness arena in San Diego, to the point now that we're not so much leading from behind anymore, but we're out front. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Other commissioner questions or comments? I have one. I'm thinking through the District 3 outreach effort and then the downtown partnership clean and safe outreach. Where does all of that information roll up into this citywide sort of outreach, or how are we coordinating to make sure that there's not different outreach philosophies and practices that could be potentially conflicting or redundant or just otherwise not helpful to the end goal?
Actually, there's a couple things that are happening on that. So the RTFH is working with the consultant that we worked with as part of the RFP. And they are in their final stages of creating outreach standards and practices for the entire region, which creates the sort of threshold and expectation and the framework within which outreach should be carried out. This is also really based on, like Jonathan said, national best practices. And I would say that this particular consultant that's working with us is arguably probably one of the leading industry experts in the country and possibly beyond that on outreach. The other component, though, as that work gets socialized and that training and that resource gets pushed out into the community, the other component of this particular program that we're standing up here is a communication strategy and a rollout and implementation strategy, where we'll be working with the downtown partnership. We'll be working with other outreach programs that PATH administers. We'll be working with the homeless outreach workers through the county, which is a critical component of this work as well, so that we create a framework and a puzzle of outreach that covers the entire city system. And everybody knows where everybody is on every given day, and everybody knows sort of what their marching orders and their assignments are. Obviously, this takes a collaboration and a willingness to work together, but I think the work that we've done over the last couple of years, the community action plan coming into place, we have a really good opportunity to work together and really be the coordinator of an integrated system. And that's the goal. And that communication with our business districts and our council staffers is going to be really important in rolling that out effectively.
Thanks. And let me know how any of the commissioners can help you with that. Rick, did you want to add something?
Just want to emphasize a point, and that Lisa just said, and to put in context with something that Mitch said a little while ago. And that is, I think, a real benefit that the Housing Commission has brought to this whole field is to provide some a framework of consistency, uniformity, and a more systemic approach. I think that was the word Mitch used a while ago, systemic. And that's why we're trying to go about doing this, so that there's one way generally of getting things done here. And as we move forward in this arena, I think you're going to see more of this sort of thing from us in the future.
Do we have any questions, comments, or a motion? Item 104.
Move to approve.
Commissioner Davis
Second.
and seconded by, was that Commissioner Hester?
Hubbard.
Hubbard. Great. We'll go ahead and vote. Vice Chair Klumpner,
Yes.
Commissioner Akers,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Hester,
Yes.
Commissioner Hubbard,
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Aye.
Great. I'm also in favor of this, so that will carry unanimously. Moving on to our final item, 105, the execution of the memorandum of understanding for the operation of the Homelessness Response Center and approval of the agreement with PATH to provide services. We received 3 public comments for this item, and I'll ask our general counsel, Chuck Christensen, to read those comments into the record.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much. Chuck Christensen on behalf of the Housing Commission. The San Diego Housing Commission's established a rule for public comment during the pandemic. And that rule requires that comments be submitted to the Housing Commission on or before 4 o'clock the day before the hearing. In this case, we received 3 requests for public or public comments. 1 came in a timely manner and 2 did not. All of those have been forwarded to the board members, however, and without waiving or setting a future precedent, the commission has elected to not enforce that rule, but to in fact read all 3 of the comments to allow a full participation of the public during this pandemic. The first is from Heather Pollock Averick, who wrote, having 2 properties on the same street as the Homeless Response Center, we represent one of the key stakeholders under this proposal. As such, we request the San Diego Housing Commission commit to providing dedicated 24/7 roving security staff to patrol the entire Imperial Avenue corridor between 14th and 16th Avenues, as well as a full-time outreach staff devoted to Imperial Avenue to support both neighborhood and needs of individuals in the surrounding area. Further, we would ask that an expansion of staffing hours to include Sundays, as well as staggered weekday schedule to support a wider array of individuals who may not be able to come to the center during regular business hours. We look forward to being neighbors and to working together to ensure that this site helps continue the efforts of many over the years in improving Imperial Avenue. The next comment submitted on this item was from Jonathan Taylor and appears to be identical to that written by Heather Pollock Averick, so I will not read that into the record again. The final comment, however, we received, which was not received in a timely manner, but is being read anyway, it was from Anthony White from Family Health Centers of San Diego. He wrote, as the current operator of the Housing Navigation Center, soon to be rebranded to Homeless Response Center, since little actual housing is available. Family Health Centers of San Diego is proud of the services provided to those experiencing homelessness. Despite the significant hurdles of the facility itself, compounded by the decisions of the San Diego Housing Commission, those of the City of San Diego, and funding mechanisms chosen for the Housing Navigation Center, FHCSD provided over 2,000 unique homeless individuals during our short tenure. The San Diego Housing Commission staff, let me read this again. San Diego Housing Commission staff, those you oversee, have stated publicly more than once they are working to transition clients to a new program. They are not. They are not because the new program doesn't exist. The new program is what you are being asked to approve today and will only go into effect following approval by the Housing Authority on October 27th, 2 days before we are to have transitioned clients and vacated the building. Clearly, the needs of those experiencing homelessness were not prioritized in decision-making process that resulted in this request to you today. That concludes the public comments on this matter.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and move into our presentation. Again, this is going to be Lisa. Go ahead.
Good morning again. With me today is Deanna Villanueva, Vice President of Housing First Programs for the Homeless Housing Innovations Division. We're here before you today to discuss the recommendation to execute a memorandum of understanding between the San Diego Housing Commission and the City of San Diego for the operation of the City of San Diego's Homelessness Response Center, and to approve an agreement between the Housing Commission and People Assisting the Homeless, or PATH, to provide system navigation services as a project partner. Next slide. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, in-depth planning and collaborative efforts have occurred to mitigate the impact to persons experiencing homelessness in San Diego. The future state of our homelessness crisis response system was also at the forefront of the decisions lead agencies were making as the city's response to serving persons experiencing homelessness during the pandemic developed. A key goal of Operation Shelter to Home was to pilot new practices and design a more client-centered integrated system in alignment with the guiding principles and foundational strategies of the city's Community Action Plan on Homelessness. Next slide. The Operation Shelter to Home overview presented to the board last month on September 18th included information about the Housing Navigation Team. This team consists of staff from the Housing Commission's Homeless Housing Innovations Division and the Regional Task Force on the Homeless. They focus on facilitating positive exits from Operation Shelter to Home through housing navigation and landlord engagement. In the last 6 months, we have facilitated exits to permanent or longer-term housing for more than 700 people, and close to 400 additional people are matched to other housing resources in our system. Next slide. With the lessons learned from Operation Shelter to Home, the Housing Commission proposes to leverage its subject matter expertise, existing Housing First San Diego programs, and strong partnerships to achieve a broad vision for the Homelessness Response Center in the City of San Diego. The current Housing Navigation Center program has coordinated multiple partners at a single site, providing enhanced access to a variety of services to meet the needs of persons experiencing homelessness and increased access to housing navigation services. Building on the existing foundational model, the Housing Commission's proposal will enhance the program design to implement a streamlined, coordinated, client-centric City of San Diego homeless crisis response system. The Homelessness Response Center will be the gateway into that system. The program will drive the strategic development and implementation of a streamlined, coordinated, system-level approach. It will provide access to services across the spectrum of need, from homelessness prevention to permanent housing placement. Next slide. The program's objective is to provide system navigation services that coordinate all activities to move someone from homelessness to permanent or longer-term housing. System navigators will identify the needs of each client, coordinate connection to housing resources, and facilitate housing placement. System navigation is a client-centered service model that supports individuals experiencing homelessness throughout all stages of their pathway to housing. System navigators collaborate with clients, homeless service providers, permanent and longer-term housing resource programs, and community agencies like the Regional Task Force on the Homeless to facilitate all steps in connecting someone to a housing resource and subsequently to placement into housing. The program aligns with the 5 foundational strategies of the city's Community Action Plan on Homelessness and is informed by the success and lessons learned of Operation Shelter to Home. Next slide. The Homelessness Response Center will be located at 1401 Imperial Avenue in San Diego. The site will be open Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. The Housing Commission will directly operate and administer the program on site on a daily basis. PATH will operate on site as a lead partner, also leveraging their outreach programs, and the Regional Task Force on the Homeless will also have coordinated entry system staff on site as a key partner. Next slide.
This comprehensive system-wide approach organizes the work into 3 major phases. Phase 1, engagement services, will include prevention and coordinated outreach services. This phase will leverage existing Housing Commission resources, including Housing First San Diego, prevention and diversion, and landlord engagement and assistance programs. The coordinated outreach model will align with the Regional Task Force on the Homelessness outreach and encampment policies. The coordinated outreach program item, also presented to you this morning, will be a major component of a truly integrated, client-centered homelessness crisis response system. These two major projects, implemented and operated in tandem, will make significant headway in filling system gaps and creating a unified systems level approach. Next slide, please. Phase 2, crisis response and stabilization, includes diversion and coordinated shelter access. The program will apply diversion strategies as the key initial interaction with persons experiencing or at risk of homelessness. It will explore options available to the client to prevent and or quickly end their homelessness through resources outside of the coordinated entry system. This phase will also continue the coordinated shelter placement model the Housing Commission developed for Operation Shelter to Home. This model will ensure consistency of prioritization and centralized management of bed availability across city shelter programs. Coordinated shelter intake provides a much needed single point of contact for outreach teams and homeless resource providers to connect a person in need to available shelter as seamlessly as possible. Phase 3 includes universal housing assessment and housing placement activities. These activities will identify possible housing options available to a client to best meet their needs, including interventions such as family reunification, shared housing, independent living, or skilled nursing care, as well as potential matching and prioritization for resources referred through the coordinated entry system. The program will leverage existing Housing First San Diego programs, including the Housing Commission's Landlord Engagement and Assistance Program, or LEAP, and work with system partners to transition clients into longer-term or permanent housing. Next slide, please. The Homelessness Response Center will include key community partnerships and resources to ensure successful implementation. PATH will operate as a lead project partner and will provide system navigation and related services within the program. The Homelessness Response Center will also leverage the neighborhood-based coordinated outreach program that was presented earlier. The Regional Task Force on the Homeless will also be a key project partner and will work with the Housing Commission and PATH to integrate the system navigation approach with a streamlined coordinated entry system process. The program will also facilitate partnerships with service providers to support the client-centered system navigation services. Next slide, please. A foundational component of this program is the inclusion of system advisory groups. The advisory groups will include, at a minimum, a Persons with Lived Expertise advisory group, a frontline homeless services staff advisory group, a homeless service provider leadership advisory group, and a community members advisory group. In addition, the Housing Commission will be implementing a client customer service survey available by kiosk on site, as well as on a web-based platform to collect feedback that can help inform service delivery and refine programs across the spectrum of services the Housing Commission and its contracted partners provide. Next slide, please. The program will track data and metrics to monitor the overall homelessness response system flow and the effectiveness of engagement between providers and clients toward their search for housing. This will include, but not be limited to, monitoring the overall system flow, whether or not diversion activities were applied, and length of time from initial system engagement to housing. This will contribute to the development of a data-informed and systems-level perspective on the city's homelessness crisis response system, and will meet the Community Action Plan's guiding principle to make data-driven decisions and create transparency. The Housing Commission would be able to report performance across the system as an integrated whole instead of only by program. Next slide, please. The Memorandum of Understanding with the City of San Diego includes one initial term, prorated to cover partial 2021 fiscal year, and 2 one-year options to renew. The agreement with PATH includes one initial term, the contract with PATH was procured through a sole source procurement process. PATH has extensive expertise in system navigation practices that are client-centered and focused on supporting a client's pathway from initial outreach engagement to permanent or longer-term housing. In addition, PATH has extensive experience engaging with unsheltered populations and has a solid track record in successfully providing housing-focused, street-based case management. The total operations funds for the project in its entirety is an annual amount of $1,550,000 and is funded by 3 different sources outlined on this slide. The funding for the initial contract term is prorated to reflect the 8-month term and ramp-up costs. Next slide, please. Staff requests that the Housing Commission Board recommend that the Housing Authority of the City of San Diego take the actions as stated in the staff report and detailed in the following slides. Please note that the board report states that the contract would commence today, October 16th. The actual start date of the contract term is anticipated to be on or after November 1st, which includes a ramp up and recruitment timing. Next slide, please. This slide shows the remaining housing authority actions. Next slide, please. Since the report was posted, the city has made changes to the council action, so I will read those into the record. Staff also requests that the board recommend that the San Diego City Council take the following actions. Authorize the City of San Diego to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the Housing Commission for an initial 8.5-month term commencing October 16th, 2020, and continuing through June 30th of 2021, with 2 one-year options to renew for the operation and administration of the Homelessness Response Center. And authorize the Chief Financial Officer to expend the following funds for fiscal year 2021 for the operation and administration of the Homelessness Response Center. $1 million from Community Development Block Grant Funds, unobligated CDBG program, $250,000 from the Low Moderate Income Housing Asset Fund, and $300,000 from the General Fund, in a total annual amount of $1,550,000, prorated for the initial contract term to the Housing Commission for the ongoing operations of the Homelessness Response Center, contingent upon the Chief Financial Officer certifying that the funds are available. The 8.5-month term will include a half-month startup budget of $64,583.33 and an 8-month operations budget of $1,033,333.33, and authorize the mayor or designee on behalf of the city to amend the fiscal year 2021 annual action plan as applicable to ensure that the approved $1 million fiscal year 2021 community development block grant allocation to the Housing Commission for the Homelessness Response Center and all public comments about such amendment received by the city during the public comment period are included in the final amendment, and further authorize the mayor or designee to submit the final amendment to HUD for approval. Mr. Christensen also has a comment on this update, so I will hand it over.
Yes, thank you very much. The Brown Act requires generally that a public agency at least 72 hours before a regular meeting of the legislative body or local agency shall post an agenda containing a brief general description of each item of business to be transacted or discussed at the meeting, including items to be discussed in closed session. A brief general description of an item generally need not exceed 20 words. There has been a slight variation to the recommendation for the action that the city council is being asked to take, but it is insubstantial, and the notice given pursuant to the Brown Act concerning the city council's actions was 120 words. It could have been as short as the first 2 sentences of the notice. So the commission goes overboard, not in a bad way, but in providing substantial detail that's not required by law, and the change in the wording of the actions that the Housing Commission is recommending that the City Council take is in compliance with the Brown Act.
Next slide, please. And that concludes our presentation, and we are available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any commissioner questions, comments? Okay, I'll go ahead and I'll say something. I'm glad to have Path overseeing both the previous contract and this one. I think it allows for some uniformity in our outreach and making sure that our goals are strategically addressed. I would hope that as we learn more under this new iteration, that the future use of this building and of this program, as we learn more and as the data start to paint a clearer picture, that we not be so committed to one thing and instead embrace the flexibility that may come forward as we continue to see what the clients actually need versus what's available. I've always appreciated that the commission is so willing to learn and so willing to adjust according to what we see in the data. And I think this is going to be another opportunity where we're going to learn and maybe reevaluate at some point. So again, having PATH really doing that aggressive street outreach, as well as being a lead partner here is good, I think, for the uniformity of what we're doing. But I'm just hopeful we're going to be willing to be flexible. Mr. Gentry.
Just 2 or 3 points, Madam Chair, just for context purposes. The first has to do with the physical plant of the building. As everyone knows, this property was not designed for this particular purpose, and we will take a physical stock of that building when we get possession of it and make recommendations for use thereafter as we go. So we're not being locked into anything there, and I'll need this board to understand that. Second one is as to the program here, 2 comments on that. The first is that our involvement here represents and reflects what we've learned over the last 6 months or so in the convention center about using a place-based approach in dealing with a systemic addressing of the issues with each of the customers, and I like to use that word, so that it's client-centered, it's person-centered rather than, and looking forward rather than provider-centered and looking current or back. And what we're trying to do here is, again, I'll use the term that Commissioner Mitchell used a while ago, systemic. We're looking toward systematizing as much as possible and putting things together on this whole approach to dealing with the homelessness issues here that we're learning as we go, and I think the whole city has been over the last few years. Third point is, like the board to recognize and understand that although this is another incremental step in the Housing Commission getting more and more involved in the homelessness activities, as we have done so for more than the past 10 years, this is a major step forward. This is significant. It's really more than incremental, and it really puts us in a leadership role of a systematic approach to dealing with homelessness going forward. And I need the board to understand that as well, is that although it's incremental, it is significant, and I think it will have, Madam Chair, you yourself said just a few minutes ago, as we learn and go forward, there'll be some other changes and implications as well. Just wanted to say those words in terms of setting a context here.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Just want to end on the note that and that Mr. Gentry just stated. I think that this discussion around how you handle homelessness is not a new discussion, but I will say that I have learned a lot over the last 2 or 3 years in all of my involvements and in my discussions. And as Mr. Gentry and Lisa know, that this is a full-time focus. It's 365 days a year, 52 weeks. And there's ebbs and flows. And I think that the key on this, as you said, Chairwoman, is that the commission is not afraid to continue learning in the continual improvement process. Because if you're going to create, true systematic response, you have to be open to responding to what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and as I have stated to people before, nothing was etched in stone when this was started. It was a test, and we're trying to perfect our approach as a commission and as a city and as a region. And so I kudos to the staff for making this pivot. And let's get started and try this one. And I know that nothing is forever, because if it is, then you're going to fail. Everything needs to be reviewed and refreshed at times. So.
Points well taken. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Akers.
Thank you, Chair. The issues we're talking about, the property we're talking about, this whole game that we're, this thing that we're doing is of the highest scrutiny. It's very easy for everyone to be looking from the outside about how these things can be done better. And as you know, as organizations change and as local leaders change and all of these things change, I'm just heartened that the commission that we're a part of and we're supporting is about people. And I think I'm continually reminded of that. And this organization continues to work and learn to be better. And I think this is just another example of that. And I hope that we will continue to be facing these issues head on, despite the intense scrutiny. And it's easy to point out, as Rick told me just this week, good news rarely makes the news. Wins, rarely make the news. So, I look forward to continually doing things better to serve the community of San Diego and those affected by homelessness.
Thank you. Any other commissioner comments or feedback, emotion?
Move to approve.
Commissioner Davis?
Second, Commissioner
Seconded by
Hubbard.
Commissioner Hubbard. Thank you.
Mhm.
We'll go ahead and vote. Vice Chair Klempner,
Yes.
Commissioner Akers,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Hubbard,
Aye.
Commissioner Hester, going out of order,
Aye.
and Commissioner Mitchell.
Aye.
Thank you. I'm also in favor. So that motion carries unanimously. The Housing Commission Board will now convene in closed session. Mr. Christensen, will you please announce a closed session agenda for the morning?
Yes, I certainly will. Thank you, Madam Chair. The commission will now convene in closed session to discuss its closed session agenda item. That item is Roman numeral 4A, Public Employee Performance Evaluation pursuant to subdivision E of 54954.5 of the Government Code and section 54957, title President and Chief Executive Officer. That will be discussed in closed session, and at this point, there were no public comments in connection with the closed session. And after the closed session, we will reconvene an open session, at which time I will announce the action taken in closed session. We're now prepared at your direction, Madam Chair, to go into closed session.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and move into closed session then. Do I need to
much. The Housing Commission met in closed session to discuss its closed session agenda, which was item Roman numeral 4A. And the commission voted unanimously to, in their evaluation of the president and CEO. That concludes the matters that were discussed in closed session. And Madam Chair, you're able now to adjourn the meeting if you so desire.
I do so desire. This concludes the board's special meeting today. We are adjourned at 11:23. Thank you, everybody. Have a great Friday.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.